Last year's conference took place in the run-up to what turned out to be the most dramatic elections in our lifetimes. This year we haven't got as many politicians, but I am delighted to welcome Caroline Spellman, Secretary of State, to her first NFU conference. And of course, Jim Pace, now Minister of DEFRA, is familiar to many of us, and he'll be joining us later on in our conference. We've got a great lineup of experts, not just on the main platform, but in the breakout sessions and workshops. The programme will give us plenty of time and opportunity to discuss sector-specific issues. It's important, because on my way to breakfast this morning, someone mentioned to me the contrast between cereal growers like myself and livestock farmers facing massive hikes in their feed costs. Well, they're right to raise the issue, and I'm aware that those high prices are making things incredibly difficult for livestock sectors at this moment in time. My job as president is to make sure I represent everyone at these challenging times. As I've said, we've tried to get plenty of sessions on the conference programme to cover a wide range of interests and opportunities. Hill farming, tenants, on-farm renewables, and for the first time in conjunction with the MPA, the pig sector is covered. Please make the most of those sessions and make your views heard. Right, let's move on to the theme of this year's conference: farming at the heart of the economy. It is always hard to choose a theme a few months in advance of a conference such as this. Actually, there's so much going on around us that talking about farming at the heart of the economy feels to me like a massive understatement. Since we met last year, we've seen the droughts in Russia, floods in Queensland, and again, the hottest global year recorded on record. Wheat made its biggest, highest ever one-day jump. Global food prices are now their highest ever levels. And they've played a major role in the upheaval in Tunisia and Egypt. There's also talk of countries importing countries, stockpiling grain as fast as they can get their hands on it. At the same time at home, we've got the latest negative GDP figures. We've got fuel prices going through the roof. And I think it's important that we should acknowledge food inflation is becoming a real worry for families on stretched budgets. So my message is clear. Farming and the food we produce is absolutely central to our social and political stability. Because of this, I was struck a few days ago by a piece in The Economist about whether rich governments really worry about feeding the world. Dan Klickman, he was the US Agricultural Secretary for 6 years under Bill Clinton, and he was quoted in the article, and he said, "I'd like to say agriculture is top of the agenda," but he concluded, "but I don't believe it is." I have to say, I am becoming increasingly frustrated at how we always seem to see the solutions to this big challenge lying somewhere else. I want to bring it back home, back here this morning, and look at what it would mean to agriculture to be top of the policy agenda here in the UK. As you will all know in the audience such as this, the UK's Government Office for Science published only last January a major report into the future of food and farming. I was privileged to be part of the project's high-level stakeholder group, and I can tell you, it's not been cobbled together by a couple of desk-based policy wonks. It's a massive piece of work, 2 years of hard work with over 400 experts from over 35 countries being involved. We really should sit up and take notice of it. In a nutshell, it's about what policymakers need to do today to ensure the world is fed tomorrow. It's had massive coverage in the press, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time repeating its messages. But I will repeat the task we face. We have 20 years to deliver 40% more food, with 30% more fresh water and 50% more energy. And the report is emphatic that business as usual isn't going to do it. Add in climate change and the need to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the way food production is using up natural resources, the risks to the environment of how we farm, adding volatility in supplies and markets. It all means that bold actions and some very urgent, difficult decisions will be needed. And I acknowledge as well, it's got some uncomfortable messages for us as farmers too. Someone earlier challenged me, early this month, challenged me to say exactly what I'm suggesting the UK government should do about it. It is a fair challenge. Let me try to answer it. I will deal first with the domestic side of things, and then I'll move on to the CAP and Europe. One of the things the Foresight Group was clear about was that self-sufficiency is not what individual countries should be aiming for. Fair and fully functioning markets are what will best deliver food security. And I agree with that. We know that 100% self-sufficiency is not the solution for the UK. We are a trading nation. And as farmers, we are both dependent on trade for our machinery and our inputs, and we benefit enormously from it. But we should be seriously worried about where our reliance on imports is heading. That graph shows really clearly what's happened over recent times. As I said over the new year, if we continue like this, and with our own population set to grow to over 70 million by 2030, it will not be long before 1 in every 2 meals eaten in this country comes entirely from food produced abroad. Added to this, I now find a lot of people on their high horses about how bad export bans are. But let's be serious. If we're going to have a debate about morality, I honestly believe that a country that is short of food, trying to protect its own people by banning grain exports, is nothing compared to a rich country allowing their agriculture to decline and then expecting the rest of the world to feed them. The conclusion has got to be the UK has a responsibility to produce more, not less. So what do I want the government to do about it? Secretary of State, we really are pleased to see you here today. But there are many in the farming community who are delighted that there has been a change in government and a new team in DEFRA. And of course, we've already seen some real changes to the new government and the DEFRA ministerial team that they've made. Let me give you 4 examples where we believe you're already making a difference, but I know there are many more that I could have used. You've started to free farm businesses from unnecessary regulation and red tape with the work of the Regulation Task Force. And farmers are looking forward to hearing Richard McDonald's recommendations in a couple of months' time. You've trusted us on how the Pesticides Directive is implemented and not just burdened us with extra costs and restrictions. The figures are very impressive. It will save 100 million a year to us and 150 million in one-off costs. Of course, there is a continuing challenge. We need to recognise that we have to have a professional response and we can't take our foot off the pedal on the voluntary initiative. But it is a good start to trusting us to deliver. Thirdly, the most significant for our dairy and beef producers. You've started through your consultation the task of tackling the ghastly scourge of bovine TB that's led to so much needless distress and waste over many years. We know and understand that it will be a long battle and that any action to eradicate this disease in wildlife is far from an easy option. You have our support and our backing. My last example is on science. The government has protected research and development spend from the worst of the cuts. That's something we as an organisation have lobbied for. It's good news and crucial to the Foresight Group's vision, not just on raising the yield side of the equation, but on climate change and the environment. Let me give you 2 examples. The work at IBERS to develop new varieties of ryegrass for changing climates, or the work at East Malling to reduce the amount of water used in potato production. That R&D spend is important. Secretary of State, one of the first things you said when you arrived at DEFRA in your new post was, and I quote, "I will work across government and beyond to respond to the challenges of increasing food production." I can't tell you how refreshing that was as an opening statement from a DEFRA minister. And some of what you've done will help free up farm businesses, I've already mentioned, to do what they do best: productive agriculture done sustainably. So permit me to ask a frank question this morning. You've shouted loud about the government's environmental credentials. You have two really big policy pieces of work in hand on the natural environment and water, and we expect to see both those white papers shortly. It is of course right that the government focuses on these vital areas, and the NFU is heavily involved in their work, and that's being done, all in line with what foresight tells us. But where's the food plan? Where's the food white paper that reflects the foresight challenges? Now, I'm not sitting here talking about a Soviet-style grand plan led from Whitehall. I understand, and I think farmers everywhere appreciate the fact that those days are over. But unless there's something more substantial, more thought through than a one-line objective in DEFRA's business plan, it's difficult to see how we're going to start reversing the trend lines on those graphs behind me.